Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think are underrated or underseen. I'm the host for this week, Josh Allen, and I'm joined as ever by my wonderful co-host, Alice Oliver. How you doing, Alice? You all right?
Oh, I don't know. I'm a little bit scared this week. I'm a little bit creeped out.
Oh.
Things are getting a bit spooky, Josh, because it's Halloween.
Halloween, innit? Halloween. Again, here we are again. It seems like a year ago we were doing a Halloween episode.
Is this only our second, or is this our third? This has got to be our
special Halloween episode.
Halloween, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we clocked on that Halloween was a thing until after COVID. When we thought about all the things we'd missed, and then taking sweets off strangers in doorways was one of them. But yes, I'm very well. I'm very excited. You know I'm excited, don't you?
Yes, I too. I'm very excited. I'm a little bit creeped out, but that's okay.
Yep, that's because it's Halloween, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's Halloween, as I've said, so we've got a very special guest for you. We are joined by an actor. She's known for many roles in the UK horror scene. Ayvianna Snow, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very grateful to be here.
It's lovely to have you. So this might seem like an absolutely stupid question, but as it's a Halloween episode and based on your filmography, I think I probably know the answer to this, but are you into Halloween?
I am very into Halloween. It's my favourite time of the year. This is very much my month.
So. So what do you get up to then? What does your Halloween month look like?
I like a bit of Wicca. I like to go around Highgate Cemetery dressed up in my diaphanous witch gown. I like to dance in the moonlight. You're actually not allowed to do so any longer at Highgate Cemetery. They changed the rules. If you go on their website now, they say no ghosty stuff, nothing to do with the undead.
Oh no! Is that because of you? Did you turn up one too many times?
I've been forced out of Highgate Cemetery. And I've got to find somewhere else to do my moonlight dancing this year, but I'll find something, I'm sure.
So something I want to ask you is, obviously you do a lot of UK horror films, and if you look at your social media, it's all quite horror focused. Like, what's that like? Is that something that you decide to do, or is it just something that you think, oh, I like it, so that's what I'm gonna aim for? How does that come to be?
I think the first horror film I made, I kind of stumbled into by accident. I ended up auditioning for Paul Hyatt, who was a fantastic makeup artist who then became a director and made a film called The Convent back in like 2016. And I was really late with the auditions. They'd already kind of held the main auditions and most of the main cast had been chosen. And then I somehow got in the door to be seen for this. It was a nun with sort of, I don't think I even had a line. I think I died at the beginning and then came back to life and just sort of, but I somehow managed to, I don't know, hustle my way in the door to this audition and got the part, and then spent a sort of very fun week running around a drafty castle in Wales. And at the time I didn't think it would lead anywhere. I just thought, oh, well, that was a fun week, and thought no more of it. But yeah, it sort of spiraled. It grew like a disease. It spread from one part of my body to the next. In that I then got another horror film and then another horror film, and then you kind of get known for doing a certain thing. And also all your contacts, like all my kind of friends in the industry, you make, like, if you start going to Fright Fest religiously, you make a lot of horror friends almost, and then they offer you something in their film, and then before you know where you are, you suddenly you've done loads of horror films. But I really like the genre, and it's hugely enjoyable, and it's a great genre, and there's a great audience that love it. So why not?
Horror fans are like some of the most devoted fans, I think.
They're so ardent. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always think like horror films look like they're really fun to make.
Mm-hmm.
It depends. I mean, I work mainly in the UK, as you've said, and there's certain like tropes with horror films. You quite often find yourself outdoors, maybe in a wood.
A lot of makeup.
And quite often fake blood, which is very sticky.
Yeah.
Sticky and kind of uncomfortable, and you're quite often very cold because like this time last year I was out in the Welsh woods just outside Hereford in a wedding dress playing a ghost bride that was appearing to people trying to walk through a wood, which looks lovely on screen, but just freezing from and it's in a lot of the time it's night shoots as well, because these things tend to be set at night. So you do spend a lot of time outdoors in the dark, in the cold, going, why did I choose this job? But we love it, really.
I suppose it's like when you see Christmas song music videos, and you can tell they were made in August, but everyone's in massive jumpers, or the opposite, when it's like people on the beach, but they're clearly in the middle of winter.
Yeah,
that's when the beaches are clear, though, isn't it? That's when you want to get
4 o'clock in the morning, because that's when you can clear the beach.
So just to go off on a different tangent, just quickly. So I feel like I can hear a Welsh accent. Where about in Wales are you from?
I'm not from Wales.
Oh, you're not? Am I imagining the
no.
Welsh accent?
Well, I was born in Northern Ireland, which I think maybe throws people off. But I came to England when I was in my teens. So I have a sort of British-Irish mixture. I've lived in both countries. So
I could have sworn you were Welsh,
well,
I could hear that twang. I was like, oh, where's she from?
I have an interesting voice, because when I went to drama school in England, I was taught for many years how to speak in sort of the Queen's English. Mm-hmm. So when you come out of drama school, you sort of talk like that, because you've been taught to speak for 3 years. And so I've just had it's a mixture of sort of Northern Ireland, England, and then a lot of elocution lessons. So
that makes a Welsh accent in Alice's head.
That's
is a
so
mixture
weird.
of teen years in Northern Ireland, a bit of England, and then some elocution lessons equals a Welsh accent, Alice, doesn't it?
I'm hearing things. Gosh.
So, one thing I'm always interested in is, would you call yourself, Ayvianna, would you call yourself a scream queen? Because that's like a horror thing, isn't it? Scream queen.
Oh my goodness.
That's such a great title, I think. Like, there's no other version of that.
It's I don't know whether I'm there yet. I mean, to me, the scream queens are like Jamie Lee Curtis and people like that. And I wouldn't like to sort of award myself a title, but I don't know whether I deserve. Maybe one day I will reach the heights, the giddy heights of being a scream queen. I'm only a scream princess at the moment.
Because is there a male version of Scream Queen? Yell fella?
That was good. That was good for top of your head, Josh. That was good effort, man.
Shout loud.
Shout loud.
Howl gowl.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's
howl
good.
Ghoul? No,
Howl Ghoul.
I don't know. That doesn't work.
No, I can't think of one.
No. Anyway, so we always, despite the fact we've been talking for ages now, we always start with a completely random question. It's a little bit less random because it's our Halloween special, so I put it out to the listeners. And Jacob Davison on Twitter got in touch to say, it's quite an open-end question. It said, what is your favourite monster? So making it Halloween specific. Let's go for you first, Alice. What's your favourite monster? Let's say movie monster. You want me to say
that's sort of where my head went initially. Sort
not
of similar
like,
when
some
we
guy
did.
That
What?
Not like some guy that like.
No, it's like fucking Derek from down the road. I tell you. No, because it made me think of when we did top 10 pods, and they asked us to think of our top 10 movie monsters. So that's
they did, didn't they?
Where I sort of started going with it. I really like, and you let me know if this counts or not, but I do love the sharks in Deep Blue Sea. The hyper intelligent, swimming backwards, extra large, recognizing guns, etc., etc. I love those guys. Eating parrots.
Is that your favourite though? Your favourite is the sharks from Deep Blue Sea.
They're just the ones. I think they're the ones that I do enjoy the most. I think Godzilla obviously looks great. And the Tremors monsters are pretty cool too. The worm things, worms, they're pretty cool. What about you, Josh? I reckon you'll have a much better answer for this,
I mean, there's loads of classics, isn't there? You think of like your Frankensteins and your Wolfmans, and you've got like your more modern 80s ones like Freddy Krueger, Jason, Michael Myers, all that sort of stuff. For me, I think it's vampires. I think it's the classic. And when I think of the most classic movie monster, it's whether it's Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, whatever, Twilight.
Nicolas Cage now.
Nicolas Cage, yeah. It's vampires for me. I think that's the quintessential Halloween monster, and one of the easiest costumes.
Put some bangs.
Just kids come to the door. Yeah. Last year, I bought a mask, a full head one you put over your head, which the size of my head isn't easy, and it just didn't play. They would just knock at the door, and you're like going, "Whoa, who's this? Can I have some sweets?" Yeah, there you go. Like, it was just rubbish, honestly. It was absolutely rubbish. But what about you, Ayvianna? What's your favourite monster?
My favourite is so Neil Gaiman, who's one of my favourite authors, wrote a book called Coraline, which was adapted for the screen back in, I think 2009.
The animated one? The animated one, yes.
Which was made by Leica Studios, based in Oregon. And the antagonist is the Beldam, and she presents at first as a sort of loving mother. She's very kind of warm and nice, and then as the film progresses, you see her true form, and she's very tall and very thin, and so thin that she's brittle, and she's insect-like, and she sews buttons in your eyes, and she lures children into her den to steal their life. And I just think it's exactly. I love Gaiman's writing. It's dark, unsettling, just a sort of gruesome fantasy. Yeah, I think the Beldam is my favorite. She's terrifying.
That is one of the creepiest films I think I've ever seen. Like, it is creepy, and it just gets creepier as it goes on. It's so well done.
It's one of my favorite ever films. I think it's astoundingly good. And again, it preys on like a real mother, which is something we all, who do you trust in the world more than your real mother? And to have that kind of turned into a dark monster.
That's a really, really good point. Well, I don't think I've ever seen Coraline, but we'll put it out to the listeners so my other half really likes it. We actually got it somewhere on DVD in the place where everyone keeps their DVDs, which is the Loft, because everyone has streaming services now. But anyway, I've never seen it, so I think I'll give that a watch this
should.
Halloween.
Yeah, I love it.
I think you'd like it, Josh, just because it is just a good film as well. Like, it's just really well written.
I like Tim Burton. I like Tim Burton.
Yeah.
So I've just never got around to watching it. But I'll give that. I shall give that a watch. Anyway, let's move on to talking about this week's film, which is Little Joe from 2019. So Ayvianna, you picked this one. So tell the guys at home a little bit about, in a sort of 10, 20 seconds, what it's about, and then why did you pick it for this, apart from the fact that we asked you to pick a film?
So Little Joe was directed by Jessica Hausner, and it stars Emily Beecham and Ben Whishaw as scientists, researchers working in a lab developing a plant. And the idea is that if you buy the plant and have it in your home, it sort of helps with depression. The sort of tagline is Little Joe makes you happy. And at first everything seems fine, and then as the film progresses, Emily Beecham's character begins to believe that something's gone wrong with the plant, that it's been rushed through, that actually the plant causes harm, that the people around her that have been in contact with the plant are beginning to change for the worse. And it's all about kind of whether or not she can trust her own perceptions of reality and what's happening around her. And that, I think, is what I like about it, is that it's unsettling. So it's not sort of a flashy horror. It's not just kind of all blood and guts and gore. It sort of has it creates a deep sense of unease, a growing sense of unease. And the idea to me that you may not feel safe in your own mind, can you trust your own perceptions, your own memories? That to me is terrifying. So and I think it kind of didn't get enough attention when it was released. Because I think it's genuinely really, really good. So I thought that's an underrated film,
and probably a little bit underseen as well. If more people should see it, so it's the coveted double whammy. So we'll get stuck into talking about it now. I think it was a very interesting film, but we'll get into it. So Alice, had you seen this one before?
Hadn't seen it, hadn't heard of it. So that's 2 points there for underseen. But
join us next week when
we did it. Bye guys. But there was a lot of, I thought, just like technically really impressive things about this film that I can't wait to get into. What about you, Josh? Had you seen this one?
So I hadn't seen it.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I'd heard of it. I don't think I had, but it's filmed in Liverpool, or a lot of it is filmed in Liverpool.
It sure is.
It doesn't say it's set in Liverpool, despite the fact that the live birds are very prominent in a couple of shots. But
and the M for the Mersey travel as well, is
the
there?
Mersey travel and all that, and the cathedral and all that. But I'm wondering, you know, when you see like, because Ayvianna, if you don't already know, we both live in Liverpool. So if you don't know, there's the Echo, the Liverpool Echo, always run, you know, things you've seen filmed in Liverpool. So I'm wondering if I'd seen it in the papers, you know, pictures of Ben Whishaw on the street where filming, you know, look at, you know, Ben Whishaw filming here or whatever. But I definitely hadn't seen it before. And overall, yeah, I mean, technically, I really enjoyed it, but technically, I think it's quite the marvel in the way that it's made. I mean, so when you sent your choices over, Ayvianna, one of the things you'd said about this was that you enjoyed the Kubrickian nature of the cinematography, and I wrote Kubrickian and then reread your email. So I saw the titles and just went for that one because I liked the sound of the title and I looked at like what it was about and stuff. And then I went back and read that you put Kubrickian and I'd already written it. And I was like, oh, so it's obviously it is because I've said it and you've said it as well.
Yeah,
so
if we both said the same thing, that's a good.
That's a good side. Yeah. So I really enjoyed it. I thought, you know, generally speaking, I thought the way it looked and sounded was probably the best part of the film. I liked the plot and the acting and all that, but so when I say the strength, that's not to say that the other things weren't good, but I thought the use of color, how stylized it was, how staged it was, how framed it was, because quite often when you think of British horror films, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, but for me, I think of things like 28 Days Later, which are very handheld camera, quite gritty, quite sort of naturalistic, whereas this is almost the opposite of that. It's so clean, it's so sharp, it's so staged. I really enjoyed that. And it did look like, you know, it looked like 2001 or The Shining or something like that. And it felt a little bit like that. The way that you know, if you take The Shining as the example that's probably the closest because it's Kubrick and it's horror, it's that idea of slowly building to something. But like you said, Ayvianna, there isn't jump scares and stuff like that. It's that sense of dread. It's that sense of unease. And it's also that sense of you're not sure what you're watching as the viewer, which is also the whole thing that's going on with Emily Beecham's character, Alice, who isn't sure, is what's happening in her head actually happening with little Joe the plant it's a little bit, I suppose, if you've not seen it at home and you listen to this, it's a little bit Day of the Triffids meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So it's a little bit like, are the plants sort of taking over the people's personalities and stuff like that? And then as it goes on, you're like, well, is it? Or is she thinking that it is and stuff like that? So I really, really enjoyed it. But anyway, coming to you, Ayvianna, because you've picked it. So what are some of the things that you particularly like about the film?
So I love, as you've already mentioned, the Kubrickian quality of the camera work. It's almost like the camera is alive and moving. So there are several scenes where the camera will be doing a sort of slow pan across toward two characters that are talking, and it will pass the two characters and continue moving, continue going on down the room or down the corridor or whatever, as if the two actors were only sort of incidental to the scene and incidental to the camera movement, which I thought was really, really just clever and stylish, and I don't see it very often. And it's almost like the camera's kind of nearly peering around corners. It gives you the sort of feeling that you're almost eavesdropping on conversations that you weren't meant to hear. It's just a very intelligent way of using the camera, I think, and using the camera in an artistic way more so than just sort of setting it up to get the shot. So I liked that. I also like the fact that at the end, there's no kind of clear resolution. I don't want to give away the kind of ending, but at the denouement, there's no sort of, you don't get the sort of yes or no as to whether was the plant really doing this or not. You never kind of get, it's sort of left up to the audience's interpretation, which I also like, because one thing I sort of sometimes dislike with horror films is the sort of final scene is a bit kind of, it's almost too clean, like it cleans everything up, you know, and it was him all along. And that's, so, whereas you kind of, in this, you sort of don't get a sense of what happened. And it sort of, things look like they're back to normal, but there's still kind of something behind Alice's eyes. And you sort of think, well, has she been taken by the plants herself now or not? So I like the kind of the lack of clarity.
It doesn't spoon feed you, does it?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So it's intelligent horror, I would say.
Is there anything else, Alice? What else did you like about it?
The biggest thing and the main thing that you obviously just can't ignore is the aesthetic of it. And I mean that in literally every single way. It's just so interesting and so striking. Like, everything is impeccably neat and clean and clinical. Even things like the framing and the way each shot has been designed. So there's a lot of really neat lines that run through each shot. And this is created using mostly different bits of the set. So when we're in the lab or when we're in Alice's home with the window frames and the way that they're styled, even the way that the Yo Sushi takeaway bag lines up with the curtains in her kitchen. Like, it's all just so controlled and so pristine and so perfect. The costumes, the props, the sets. Like, when we're in the lab, it's so stark and white and sanitized. It's almost uncomfortable to look at. And there's a few things that occur in this film that feel like they're designed to make you feel uncomfortable, but in a more subtle way than just, oh, that character's creepy or that bit of script is weird sort of thing. So, like, with the framing, like I already said, but then also the soundscape, which at times is really overtly uncomfortable to listen to with those like high-pitched noises. But then at times it would be a bit more subtle, and then just with certain tones that it would use and certain timing as well. So it just created a real vibe, and I think was really engaging. And like you said, Ayvianna, about the way, because I did notice that with the way the camera would zoom in slowly as two people are having a conversation. They frame either side of the shot, and the camera just keeps going until they're out of frame, which isn't something you see that often, but that's really immersive and does help you feel a bit more like you're there with them, like you're in the room with them as they're having that conversation. So we talked about kind of how I felt about Alice as well, and that was something I did enjoy about the mystery and the uncertainty of it. And just a little thing as well, it did remind me a little bit of Little Shop of Horrors, especially when they named the plant Little Joe
after her son,
which is like naming it Audrey too, right? It's pretty much exactly the same thing. So I really enjoyed that too.
What do you think? I'll come to you now, Ayvianna. What do you think of, obviously, because you know, of the three of us, you're the actor. What do you think of the performances in this? Because I really like performances as well. But what do you think? What do you think of them?
Yeah, I think they're excellent. I mean, I love Emily Beecham, and I've been a huge fan of Ben Whishaw for many, many years. And yeah, I mean, they're both bringing something great to it. Fantastic. Really strong across the board.
I think what works well in it as well is that we've already talked about the visuals, how striking and how stylized it is.
Yeah.
But I think that what really works, what sort of pushes the narrative forward and keeps it engaging as well, because the aesthetics of the film do a lot of heavy lifting. It's amazing to look at, but that does only go so far if you haven't got engaging performances and stuff like that. But I think what they do really well in this is it's very stylized against naturalistic performances. Ben Whishaw particularly is just so, they just seem like normal people. Obviously, Alice goes through much more of a character arc, much more of a journey, so her performances changes like it needs to for the narrative. But Ben Whishaw obviously plays the sort of, well, he's not a love interest, is he? He's a co-worker who fancies her, sort of thing, and he's very naturalistic. It's almost like something out of a soap opera, like the way he talks to her. There's a bit in it where there's a bit in it. I don't know if you noticed, Alice, but they go for a drink in the Philharmonic.
Did notice immediately. We were like, "Is that the Phil?" And then we had to look it up, and we saw that it was.
Which is a really beautiful pub in Liverpool, which is near the Philharmonic Opera House, and it's the Philharmonic Concert Hall, and it's famous for the Beatles drinking there, which is about 700 pubs in Liverpool, but it's particularly famous for that. But I did think when they were drinking, I was like, he's got served way too quick there. It's 15 minutes for a pint in the film. But anyway, but there's a scene in that where they're having a conversation over a drink, and it's like, it was like something from Coronation Street, and that's not I'm talking about kitchen sink acting. I'm not talking about to decry Coronation Street. It's something that's so naturalistic. It could just be a conversation, which is difficult to do, because as an actor, you always want to act. You always want to perform. You always want to emote. And sometimes what you need to do is actually really, really strip it back, which is what I think he's done, and Emily Beecham.
Yeah, you're right. There's often kind of not enough credit given to very subtle, naturalistic performances. When it comes to sort of acting awards, it does tend to be the big, flashy, look at me type of acting that gets awarded, when actually there's a lot of skill in kind of just being natural as well.
I always come back to one of my most controversial opinions, which I've had to stick for in the past, but I'll stick to it, which is Adam Driver should have won the Oscar for Marriage Story, not Joaquin Phoenix for Joker. Joaquin Phoenix is very, very good in Joker, but he's just being the Joker, whereas Adam Driver is playing a man whose marriage and life is absolutely falling apart. And I believe him. Not that I don't believe Joaquin Phoenix because he's playing a killing clown, but
yeah,
but
I know what you mean, though.
it's so much more
mean.
difficult to be. You know, I think as an actor, it's probably, I don't know, maybe you could shed some light on Ayvianna. It's probably almost easier to go big than stay small. It's just that to go big, yes, it might require more physical or mental or emotional energy or whatever you call it. But to keep it small, I think requires a similar amount of energy just to stave off that idea of wanting to go big. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense. And I think they do it really well in this.
Yeah. Have you done acting yourself? Is that why you're so knowledgeable about it?
He has.
Well, I don't
like
to say,
haven't you, John?
I don't like
you
to talk
love
about
talking about it. Go on.
Alice, I don't like to talk about my 2-1 from university drama. I mean, you know, it's done me a good step, but no. Yeah, I did a little bit. I've never done anything professionally or anything like that. I'd love to say I had, but I wasn't very good. So that's why I'm
that's
doing.
Not true.
Maybe you were going too big, and you need to rein it in and be more Adam Driver and less Joaquin Phoenix.
You always want to do the, you know, everyone wants to go big,
and
everyone wants to be memorable, but memorable doesn't mean big. You know, sometimes you just got to be, you know, Phil Mitchell or Steve McDonald. Rather than Joaquin Phoenix. Okay, so we'll move on then to talking about things that we might change about the film, that we didn't like about the film. I don't think there's going to be loads for this bit, but we always try and be balanced, don't we, Alice? So what do you reckon? Anything you didn't like? Anything you'd change?
So I've got a few like little things, okay, but there were no big offenders in this for me. So, but I reckon
the acting, the writing,
the whole film. It started and it finished, and it was just a bad time. No, but I feel like you two might be able to shed some light on a couple of these, and maybe offer more insight and a deeper explanation as to why I'm wrong. So. The first thing, and this is really silly, but it is just something that I noticed and I thought was really weird. And that's that in one scene, Joe is wearing a South Park t-shirt, right? And I found that really odd because it kind of felt like a costume mistake instead of like trying to insinuate that Joe is a fan of South Park. And it just felt really strange and really out of place. Like, so in some films you do get people who wear like band t-shirts and stuff, like the guy in Bring It On wears the Clash t-shirt, and then that's a point, you know, it's like, oh, he likes the Clash, he's into that sort of music, that kind of thing. So it sort of makes sense in that regard. But in this, it just wasn't anything. But it was like, that fella's got Kenny on his t-shirt.
So you feel like, so I suppose, is your point that you feel like they use such a recognisable image to not comment on it is strange sort of thing. I suppose in films like this, particularly this film with the way we talked about it, the way it looks, it's a lot of bold but plain colours.
A lot of that.
And so perhaps
lots of block.
Because the image is on his t-shirt, maybe it's really noticeable.
Yeah, and it was just like a really strange choice. Like, you don't see that often characters in films wearing t-shirts of other characters in other sort of TV shows and
they
films
normally
and
take
stuff.
Most of the time they take logos and stuff off of stuff, don't they?
So it was just really weird, and I thought it really stood out to me. But anyway.
Sometimes when they do that, they're trying to sort of, it's a kind of cheap, quick way of building a character, which sort of saves them from having to write lots of dialogue. Just, have him wearing a football t-shirt, that'll do, or just to try and make him, how do we make this kid a bit more interesting or give him a personality? Or, like, well, they do it sometimes with like, you're right. They do it with teenagers a lot, where they dress one up as a goth or something, and then that'll save us from having to write an interesting personality for her because we've given her purple streaks in her hair. And that'll do instead, you know. So it's sometimes lazy screenwriting.
Is it like the sort of is it the teenage boy equivalent of about 20 years ago when if you wanted to show a girl was quirky and like an indie drama.
He had blue hair.
Blue hair?
Yeah, precisely.
She's not got her normal hair colour.
So that was just, I just thought that was peculiar and just really stood out to me. But move on now. And then there was a couple of other things that I just sort of, I didn't really find them super believable within the world of this film. So at that lab that they're in, where they're doing all the work, all the botany, so it really doesn't seem like the sort of environment where you should be bringing a dog. to work, right?
I've got that in my notes.
So I appreciate, so Bella does have a history of mental illness, and they do explain that. So it could well be that that is her emotional support dog, which I get. But they talk like what they're doing around the lab and in that environment is really delicate, possibly unethical, and that they don't really fully understand the full potential of the implications and of what they're doing. So I just didn't buy that they would let a dog just in there running around, sort of doing its thing. And then at one point it gets locked in the lab and it gets infected.
Even if it was an emotional support dog, which is obviously is things that something that people use and all that, but if you're in like a botany lab, you probably would be going, well, it can't go in the lab because it might eat something.
It felt weird, didn't it?
I don't know. I thought that. The other thing I thought is she's called Bella and the dog is called Bello.
Bello, yeah.
And I was like, that's quite confusing. That's like me. That's like me having a dog called Jish. Like,
or Joss.
Yeah, Joss, yeah.
It did take me a while. It took me a while because I was like, is she Bella or is the dog Bella? And then I eventually heard there were certain times where she really enunciated it nice and clearly. It was like, oh no, Bello is the dog and she's Bella. But yeah, I just don't think that dog would be in that environment. I don't think that's a responsible thing to do. Do you know what I mean?
Was there anything else?
So there is a couple more things. So another one, similar to that one, is that, so obviously they're very, very careful around the plants and stuff. You know, when they leave that lab, they disinfect their shoes, they sanitize their hands, they end up wearing masks and stuff around it. But then constantly they leave the lab wearing their lab coats and then go all eat in the canteen, all wearing their lab coats. So I just felt like that was a little bit inconsistent. So I was like, well, how careful do you actually have to be? Like, what are the rules here and how cautious have you all decided to be with this? You're saying you need to wear masks, you sanitize your hands, you disinfect your shoes, but then you're in there in them coats and you're going out and you're all going down to lunch in them coats as well. That just felt a little bit inconsistent for me. And then just finally, I don't think Selma's character was established enough before she got infected and started acting weird. So we didn't see enough of her to then realise that she's acting strange and has been infected by the plant. So it comes across a little bit like it's a bad performance. But I do think if we'd spent more time with her before she got infected and saw what she was like seen her mannerisms and her attitude and how she speaks and stuff, then this wouldn't be the case. So I feel like I would have appreciated a little bit more character development around her, because we got that a lot with the other characters. Like, they have some establishing features and qualities and stuff so that when they turn, you can sort of sense, oh yeah, they've been infected, or you think, they've been infected. But with Selma, she only said like a couple of words before she got infected. And then after she was infected, she was quite prominent and she had a lot more screen time. So I just would have liked a little bit more time with her. But that was it. So no major offenders in this one for me. What about you, Josh?
No, I mean, nothing really for me. I didn't even notice some of the stuff you said there. Although, to be fair, to comment on the Selma thing that you said, so if you've seen the film, that Selma is her son's sort of girlfriend or friend, it never really specifies. But I forgot who she was when he started talking about it, and it took me a minute to go, oh yeah, it's Joe's girlfriend. No, for me, so the one thing I have seen, we'll come on to the critical reception shortly, is that I saw one review that sort of said it was slowly paced and a bit boring. Now, for me, I think the pacing is a choice. I think that slow build and of unease and dread and all that is a choice. And I think if you're saying that, I think you're it's like saying 2001 is slow, because it's made like that. I don't think you can make a film that's only it's what is it, an hour and 40 minutes, something like that. I don't think you can make a film that's that short and then say, but I've made it slow on purpose. Well, that's my personal opinion anyway. So I think that is the point, but I do see how you might put this on if it wasn't your cup of tea and think, okay, it is a little bit slowly paced for me. It wasn't for me. I think it was a choice, but I do sort of see how you could think that. The only other thing I noticed is there a completely random Brexit joke at the end? Did you notice that?
Oh, it's no. Go on. What was
so
it?
When they decide to put Little Joe into production, her boss says, "We've sold loads of them," and then goes, "Even to the EU." Like that, and I was like, "What's that? Is that like
didn't notice.
And I didn't know, is that like a silly Brexit joke? As if like it's so good, we've even sold some of them to the EU, which we've left everybody. You know what I mean?
Or maybe because I know, or my limited sort of experience and understanding is the EU have very, very strict rules.
Yeah, well,
Exactly, it's
about
the
could be that.
regulations.
It could be
things.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very strict regulations, much more strict than the States, and I think probably much more strict than us now. So it could be something to do with that, because I know, especially like Germany as well, like so strict about things. Like America keep trying to, what was it? Was it OxyContin or something? Where America, like, they were just desperate to get it in there, desperate to get it in the market, and they were like, not a fucking chance. Like, don't you come anywhere near us with that drug sort of thing. So that maybe it's to do with that, perhaps. That the regulations are just,
you know, when a joke sticks out to you and you go, oh, that's a bit strange.
yeah.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe it probably is what you both just said there, but nothing massive for me. I thought it's thoroughly enjoyable. Really, we don't say this that often, but really visually engaging to look at and stuff like that. What about you, Ayvianna? Was there anything you don't like about it or that you'd change?
What do I not like? I think at times I didn't particularly enjoy the romance element. And I think sometimes a lot of films feel they almost have to crowbar in a kind of romantic storyline, and it seems to be almost a requirement. And I sometimes kind of question, you know, does there need to be a romance here? You know, would this actually have been more taught if it were just a single mother making this discovery? And I always kind of think, why does she need to be portrayed as a love interest on top of everything else?
We talk about that a lot.
It comes up all the time,
like with some of the films that we do, where you almost make it to the end, or you know, the film is perfectly decent and the characters are great on their own, but there's this romance just shoehorned in there. And it feels so unnecessary, and you just think, you want them to be brave enough to not do that,
just not
and to not think,
and I think, like,
oh,
for
we
me,
have to do it, sort of thing.
The weakest scenes, or sort of the least interesting scenes, are him sort of taking her to the pub and trying to flirt, because that was kind of, for me, where it lost its momentum. You know, like you said, Josh, about it's a bit slow paced at times. I think those scenes are the slow bits, because it's kind of not about the plant. It's not that interesting. It's just, so for me, I think I would have just made him a colleague, really, and I would have
just a mate, just a friend. I think that's a really good point. I think that's really good. Like you say, Alice, it comes up so often, the amount of times that it's like, and then then they get together at the end. Like, what? Like, it's not, obviously they don't, no spoilers, but they don't get together in the end of this. But like you say, it's that sort of commitment to a formula of, well, we must have a romantic interest in it, whatever the plot is. There must be some sort of romance in it, whatever form that takes. There just has to be. And I think, like you say, you've got to be brave enough to go, no, this is actually about this woman's either a complete obsession with her work, or the outcome of that obsession with her work being the plant or whatever. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, then, so we'll move on then to talking about the critical reception then, and then we'll try and decide if it is underrated or underseen, and we'll conclude with that. Alice, how do you think it did critically? How do you think it did commercially?
How do I think it did? Oh, well, commercially, I don't reckon it did very well. I don't think the budget was huge. I imagine the most expensive thing was Ben Whishaw. But I reckon around that, like, filming in Liverpool, nice and cheap. They've done a good job there. Like, there's sort of maybe like 3 main sets that we bounce between. So I reckon it was fairly low budget. But I mean, I'm guessing this wasn't in the Odeons, the Cineworlds, etc. Like, I can't imagine it hit that sort of audience. So I'd probably say it didn't do that well financially, commercially. Critically, I feel like the critics probably like this a little bit more than the audience would, but then that goes against what I said before about horror fans being really dedicated and devoted. So maybe horror fans love this, or maybe it's not gory enough for them, which is another point. So I'm just thinking out loud now, dancing around the point. How do I think it did? Maybe I'd probably say about a 6. I reckon it's probably got about a 6, bang on. I'm going to say.
And for you, would that be underrated?
I'd probably give it about that as well, to be honest. I think the concept is great, and like I said, visually it's just so impressive, and like the amount of attention to detail that's gone into it is so obvious, and I really appreciate that. There was just a few of those little inconsistencies that sort of left me sort of thinking, oh, why did this happen, sort of thing. And then what you said about people interpreting it as being slow and maybe not having the sort of pace that they're after, I think that could affect it as well. So yeah, I reckon it got a 6, and that is probably what I would give it.
Okay. All right. What about you, Ayvianna? How do you think it did? Do you know how it did critically, commercially? How do you think it did if you didn't?
I mean, I've read a few reviews, but I don't know about sort of more broadly how it did. I agree with, I think what Alice said was very perceptive. I think it probably didn't do brilliantly commercially. But I think sadly that's kind of the way the industry is going almost. It's sort of the more interesting sort of art house fare tends not to do that well commercially. And the stuff that does well commercially seems to be films about superheroes and robots, which sort of makes me despair slightly. But you're right as to whether it kind of made back the amount of money that was spent on it. I don't know. I don't think Jessica Housen has had another film out since, and it's now 2023, which is 4 years hence. Does that sort of suggest that it's been difficult maybe to get the funding for her next film? Because obviously when you're looking for funding, financiers and investors kind of look at, okay, well, how did your last film perform? I don't know. That's a very long-winded way of saying that I'm not sure.
Well, let's have a look now then. So in terms of, we'll do the critics' scores first. So at the time of recording, and I was pretty surprised by these, I'll be honest with you. At the time of recording on IMDb, it gets 5.8 out of 10.
Okay.
The critics on Rotten Tomatoes, proving Alice right, give it 67%.
Okay.
But the audience on Rotten Tomatoes give it 41%.
Ooh.
So it averages out, if you take those into consideration, at about 55% or a 5.5 out of 10. Now, for me, I think I like this a little bit more than you, Alice. I think this is a solid sort of 7.5. Did enjoy it.
Yeah.
Would watch it again, I think, which is always a big measure. I think that's really underrated. I really do. What would you say?
I mean, I would say that is underrated, and I think, especially with like a sort of score in the 40s, to me that kind of number does, you're ignoring or just not recognizing all the qualities that it does have and like the strength in some of those qualities. So yeah, I would say that is underrated as well. What would you give it, Ayvianna?
I think I would give it a solid 7.
Yeah.
And I think, it's because, as you said, it does look fantastic and it does have very solid performances, solid premise, executed quite well. I think 40% is not fair, really.
No, I think we can safely say it's underrated. In terms of underseen, I mean, I think we probably already know the answer to this, being that both me and Alice hadn't heard of it. But to give you a general idea, the best figure I can find on Box Office Mojo is that it did just over $200,000 worldwide, which obviously isn't much. Now, I know there's, Ben Wishaw's the biggest star in this, and there isn't any, massive movie stars in it. It's not got loads of special effects and all that. But even so, I think, just to touch on what you said, Ayvianna, there is definitely, if this year and post-pandemic cinema has taught us anything, I think that there is a place for films like this. They've just got to make them and take that chance. But unfortunately, if you go off just facts and figures, and the facts and figures tell you keep making more superhero films, keep making more, whatever, then that's what they'll do. Whereas on the other side of it, for example, I know this is a different kettle of fish, but if you look at Barbie, which is the biggest film of the year so far, the lesson that I think to take away from that is make more films that will get people into the cinema who don't normally go to the cinema. But the lesson they'll take from it is make more films about toys. When in fact, I'm sure a lot of people will go in because Barbie is a toy, but I don't think it's the toy bit that was getting particularly women of all ages into the cinema for Barbie, so, and that's different, but I think there's definitely something to be said for films like this, little films that are worth giving a chance to, which, outside of independent cinemas like Home in Manchester, Fact in Liverpool, Prince Charles Cinema in London, I'm not sure many people are giving it a chance, and I think that's a shame. So for me, I would say it's underseen and underrated. What would you say, Alice?
Yeah, I'll definitely give you that. I think as well with this, and I only just thought of this now while you were speaking, but it feels like a bit of a shame because I feel like this would translate really well, like to different countries and to different into different languages, because so much of it is like, it's the way that it's expressed, I do think is very like you can figure it out quite easily.
It's non-verbal,
like
isn't it? A lot of it's non-verbal.
Yeah, a lot of it is. It's a lot about looking and kind of these quite severe sort of attitudes and the sounds and the visuals and stuff. And I feel like, well, it's sort of part Austrian, or it was part Austrian funded or something, wasn't it? Yeah. And it does have a sort of European flavour to it.
Yeah, it might be a little bit of Funny Games, which is also Austrian.
Yeah. So I wonder, that's a shame that it didn't find its global audience. And I think maybe if it had been pushed a bit harder, obviously marketing budgets are it's crazy money in that. But I reckon if more people saw it, and I think maybe non-British people as well, I think they'd really enjoy it.
But also, if there's a film that you can market relatively easy, and I'm no expert, but I get the impression that horror is good to market it, because all you've got to do is release it at the right time of year and sort of go get into the cinemas for Halloween. That's what's happened before. There's been times when films are released that are a horror film in like February, and you're like, why have you released it then? When if you release it at the start of October and just put a bit of money into saying get into the cinema this Halloween, you'll make more money. But again, I'm not an expert. Obviously, sometimes they release them because they have to release them because they have a slate and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now. I think it's underrated and underseen. Are you happy with that, Ayvianna? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's indicative of a kind of a broader problem with independent film, that it is really difficult getting those films in front of an audience. And I've experienced it myself, when I've done like independent horror films, and you take it to a festival somewhere in the UK and there's maybe like 100 people in the room watching it, and that's great. But, trying to connect with an audience outside of people who are, happy to travel to Romford on a Tuesday, it is genuinely a real issue in the industry. And I believe the audience does exist for independent movies, but it's like we have a problem connecting with them, because I think it's only huge studios with $1 million budgets that can afford the kind of press campaigns that are necessary. And I don't know what the answer is. Maybe if like all the Odeons were forced to have so many slots per week for indie films, or I don't know. Maybe could there be like a special Oscar category for films with a budget of under $500,000 or something? I don't know, but just something
Best
to kind of give a platform.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, a different category. I think we need a better platform for indie work.
So there we go, another one in the bag, underrated and underseen. So hopefully you're happy with the result, Ayvianna. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to chat to you.
Thank you so much for having me on and letting me speak to you. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. We're all about, putting spotlights on things like this and artists such as yourself and stuff like that. So tell the guys at home, what have you got going on? Where can they look out for your stuff? Where can they follow you on the socials? All that sort of stuff.
Well, I am currently in How to Kill Monsters, which is doing its festival run. It just won Best Film at Dead Northern. I'm also in Wrath of Dracula on Amazon at the moment, and I'm on Instagram. Search Ayvianna Snow. I'm very accessible. You can find me anywhere. Just type it into Google, and I'm there.
I suppose with the name as well, there are not as many Ayviannas around, so it's like
exactly. There's only one of me, so
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we'll put links to anything that you want us to put into the episode notes.
Thank you so much.
Do check out Ayvianna's work and support independent artists and all that stuff. Ayvianna Snow, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there we go. Another guest episode in the bag. Another underrated and underseen film, Little Joe. Thanks very much for Ayvianna for coming on. Make sure you check out her stuff. Give her a follow on Instagram. Check out some of her films. We'll put links to everything that we can in the episode description. So click on down and see what you can see. It's always interesting to support artists like Ayvianna, who obviously putting a lot of work into something. It can be a thankless task, but do you know what? Give them a bit of love, and it is worth it. And so thank you very much for coming on. We'll be back next week with another film. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you just search for Just Films and That, wherever you get your social media, and you'll find us. We're on Patreon as well. So if you head on over to patreon.com/Just Films and That, again, links in the episode description. There's a bit of extra stuff there if you want to support us. There's loads of stuff over there. You can get ad-free extended episodes a day early, and tiers start from £1 a month. We're on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday evening from 6 p.m, you can find us on the local TV network, talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films. So if you live in Birmingham or Bristol or Leeds or Liverpool or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. I'm also uploading all the episodes onto Dailymotion. So if you head on over there and search Just Films and that, you'll be able to find us and see exactly what it is that we're up to.
Yes, lots of ways to see us, hear us, and all that stuff. But all that remains to be said for me is thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week. Cheerio!
Bye!
Happy Halloween!
Ooh, spooky!